A new report from the Jamestown Foundation highlights the threat to undersea cables. It mentions Russian hybrid attacks targeting critical undersea infrastructure, particularly fiber optic cables. Now, these attacks have surged in the Baltic and Arctic since 2021. And these disruptions threaten essential communication channels and expose the vulnerabilities of Northern Europe's infrastructure. Should India be worried as well? India accesses the internet through undersea cables which lie on the seabed in the Indian Ocean. What if they are attacked by our adversaries? What happens to our internet? Joining me now to discuss this, Lieutenant Colonel Rajan Pavitran and Commander Arnab Das. Gentlemen, welcome to the News9 Plus show. Colonel Pavitran, how vulnerable is India to undersea cable disruption? There's a very elaborate report prepared by the Jamestown Foundation about these attacks that are actually happening right now in the Baltic. Russia and China are attacking these undersea cables. We are aware of the Chinese vessels, their survey vessels are very active in the Indian Ocean region around the spots where we have cables entering the Indian subcontinent. How vulnerable are we to undersea cable disruption?
Okay, so for the undersea, I will leave it to Commander Arnab. But what I'll tell you is, India is uniquely vulnerable.
Yes.
Because we have transitioned to 100%, declared aim is to transition to 100% digital economy. Now, when you transition to 100% digital economy, constitutionally, our armed forces have to defend this economy, or we should prepare ourselves to defend this economy. Now, how do we defend this economy when all the root zone servers, 13 of them, 10 of them are in the US, two of them are in Europe, and one is in Japan. So if access to these root zone servers gets shut down, within about 7 days, our whole internet is supposed to go kaput. Okay. Now, to mitigate against this risk, both Russia initially and China, they've carried out multiple exercises, is what we have come to know, to see whether even if this gets cut, will the net stand up within India, within their own respective countries. Like, for example, your banking access, your whatever you're doing for your daily life.
Yes.
So they seem to be assured that that will happen. But in India, we have no mandate to localize data, and a lot of our services are we access it from abroad. So, in such a scenario, and I don't think we have carried out any military exercises as far as in the public domain is concerned. So, in such a scenario, we are at very high risk. How do we mitigate against it? Has the armed forces been given a direction? Has the industry been prepared for it? Have we carried out or have we done coordination with these other countries to learn how did they go about doing that? I have not heard of anything. So I feel that we are highly vulnerable.
We are highly vulnerable, and that's very worrisome, Colonel Pavitran. I mean, the fact that we could just literally have our internet shut off at the flick of a button and we know what to do about it. But Commander Das, I want to come to you now because you're an expert on underwater domain awareness. You're one of the few people who've been literally red flagging this issue of the fact that we have so little underwater domain awareness. This question of all of our undersea critical infrastructure, all of the cables that transport our internet that come from these underwater cables, how vulnerable are they really to external factors, saboteurs, given the number of Chinese survey vessels that are active in the Indian Ocean region, some of them even as we speak right now?
Yeah, I mean, as Pavitran sir mentioned, the criticality of this aspect doesn't need any discussion. I mean, I think we can leave it aside. But, you mentioned about the Baltic Sea, but, in 2023, Taiwan has had issues with 2 Chinese ships in the area cutting the only 2 submarine cables that supply internet.
Right.
Then I will not again talk about the Baltic Sea, but then in February 2024, the Houthis missile sank a British bulk carrier. I mean, this is another case where, some other activity is not deliberately to damage the internet cable, but damage to the internet cable will make us so much vulnerable is the question you all need to understand. So, I mean, to my understanding, an alternate to this, the NATO has come up with, this concept of hybrid space stroke submarine architecture ensuring information security of telecommunication. That is to switch between submarine cables and some other means. So NATO has developed, but as Pavitran sir said that to my understanding, there is nothing that we have a mechanism or a framework to deal with such a situation.
Commander Das, my question is that which agency in India is tasked with protecting all of this very critical undersea infrastructure, especially the submarine cables?
To my understanding, I don't see, because most of these infrastructure is with private entities. I mean, in India,
Right.
We are aware of three types of cables, right? I mean, between the mainland and Andamans and the other side.
Yes.
There's two Africa pearls, IX and IEX. These are the three cables that have been laid. But
Right.
these are, with private entities. I mean, these are set up by private entities. To my knowledge, there is no declared agency which is responsible for this. I mean, other than the companies which are, which have laid it. But how much will they be able to? They are capable, or what kind of infrastructure or capabilities they have, will be something. And this is a very big geopolitical and geostrategic issue. I mean, the Chinese have developed. Even these private agencies who have laid the cables are heavily dependent on external agencies.
Right.
For laying, and even more important is the repair of, if there is a problem, the repair of these cables, and most of it is now led by Chinese, and even the Americans to some extent are relying, or to a large extent are relying on the Chinese, and being strategic in nature. If there is a real crunch situation, they can delay giving you this service. So
Right.
it's a very strategic aspect which one has to understand. Even the Americans have raised this concern. I mean,
Yes.
even in their strategic circles, and now the government has intervened to give more emphasis and give more incentives to develop indigenous capabilities even there. But in India, I don't think we have even looked at it very seriously.
We haven't looked at it very seriously, indeed, and it's very worrying to hear that from you, Commander Das. But Colonel Pavitran, what is it that we really need to do now to wake up the system, to be aware of a possibility of this nature, the fact that you could have a foreign ship or a saboteur coming and severing our internet capabilities, cables. We've seen attacks on the AIMS hospital in Delhi. There have been massive cyber attacks in the past where electricity grids have been shut down. Is there a possibility of this happening? And what should the government really do to prepare ourselves for this kind of an eventuality?
Okay, from a normal military perspective, although I'm not a naval expert, I know that the undersea cables which go along the high seas, all parts of it cannot be physically protected. So a prudent nation, like
Yes.
for example, NATO and the US, they have got their own root zone servers within their own geographical territory.
Right.
And they might be carrying out exercises which we are not aware of. The Russia has already declared that they're carrying out exercises. China also is carried, it's rumored that they've carried out such exercises. As it is, most of the infrastructure stay on their own mainland.
Right.
We are the only nation who has taken a decision to transit to a 100% digital economy. Now, when you take such a policy decision, it should also be accompanied by analyzing how do we militarily defend this domain. But repeatedly, it is seen that we take these policy decisions without looking for militarily, defending that domain. That gives us, leads us into huge vulnerabilities. So ideally, we should, since if the root zone servers, we should ask the Americans, can you relocate one to India, since we are a strategic partner, and
Right.
we have taken so many steps to ensure our data, etc. And
Yes.
this vulnerability which should be flagged. I think it was, which for reasons best known, has never happened. But if that is not so, shouldn't we be independently taking the steps what Russians, etc., have tried to take? Localize our data, try and see if all our servers will be up and running, even if 100% the internet is cut off from
Yes.
the rest of the globe, etc. These are normal things which a nation should plan for and
Right.
should do.
So, Colonel Pavitran, sorry to interrupt you, but what is a root zone server? Could you explain to our viewers why it's so critical for the safe running of the internet?
Okay, in the internet, there is a hierarchy of servers which control the whole thing. Okay, when the internet was initially created, the root zone servers, or for the short, they call it root servers. There are 13 of them, numbering from alpha to Mike. Yeah, I think it's Mike. So 10 of them, because internet is a US invention, is located on the US mainland. Okay, and 3 of them, 2 of them in Europe, and 1 is in Japan. So initially, the Americans, when they created this, they have strategically kept arm's length control. And when Snowden happened, they declared that this will be a controlled by a multi-stakeholder model, where an organization called ICANN, it will not be under the US, it will be by NGOs and different organizations from all over the globe.
Right. Sorry to interrupt you again, but Snowden is the Edward Snowden, the CIA contractor who exposed the fact that the US was snooping on a lot of the internet communication, global internet communication.
Yes, absolutely. That what we thought was a shared commons is not a commons, was unequivocally proved by Snowden.
It is an uncommon, yes.
It is a controlled domain. It's a lake. If from an ocean perspective, it has become a lake of one particular country.
Right.
But in spite of all these evidences, we continue to do what we do, basically because we have, feel that there is a ITES industry which we cannot afford to lose, which I have predicted with the coming of AI, this is bound to come, fail. Okay. Today, without any knowledge of coding, people like me can, easily create code. I feel that it is going to, unless for very specialized code, it is going to get automated, and that ITES industry is going to come to an end. It's a very, it's a logical prediction to make.
Right.
Then where does that leave us? Why have we not taken those precautions as a nation? Can you just sacrifice the rest of the nation because there is an ITES industry which is at stake? These are questions which ordinary should ask the government of the day.
These are very important questions, and you're one of the few people who've been raising these questions repeatedly, Colonel Pavitran. That's why I keep coming back to you. But Commander Das, again, now, as Colonel Pavitran mentioned, there is a need to at least locate one of these root zone servers on Indian soil to ensure that we are not completely cut off from the internet. What are the other precautions that we must take to ensure that we don't get a wake-up call like we have in other domains, especially in this very critical domain of underwater domain awareness?
I mean, see, protection is one aspect. I mean, if you just look at, I would divide it into 2 parts. One is, being a player and, having certain strategic advantage. Like if you see today, 98% of the world's undersea cables are manufactured and installed by just 4 private firms.
Right.
One US subcom is one US company, French firm Alcatel Submarine Networks, then Japanese Nippon Electric Company, and the 4th one is the Chinese. And that 87 is first 3, and the Chinese Huawei Marine Networks is controlling 11%. But the Chinese are getting more and more because in Africa and many such global south, China is rapidly gaining entry. So this is one part, but the problem is when you have a disruption, how do you react to that disruption? I mean, what Pavitran sir is saying, that if something happens, it's a kind of a redundancy that you are building in, and you have something. But if something happens, like most of the repair facilities are owned by, what I mentioned earlier, is owned by the Chinese. So they may delay providing, even if it's a private company, and most of the private companies are now controlled by the government. So they may even delay providing you that service, and interrupt internet disruption for a while, even a couple of days can create havoc. I mean, as sir said repeatedly, that we are completely now getting into the digital world, and this will also raise questions in terms of how much can we believe in this, and this transition will get disrupted if we don't have 100% confidence.
Right. Absolutely.
So that would be something very, very worrying. And also what happens is now, if we say under the Sagar vision, security and growth for all in the region, we have significant problems with our neighbors.
Right, we could have significant problems with our neighbors.
Will they trust us to, be a provider for security for internet? This undersea cable protection is also an important thing. Will our neighbors even trust, or will they allow the Chinese to enter into our neighborhood?
Absolutely.
Is something we need to look at very seriously.
A very, very fascinating aspect of this. But Commander Das, I want to go to Colonel Pavitran now. You mentioned a while earlier, Colonel Pavitran, the fact that the Russians have been exercising, and there are a number of these exercises in the last couple of years. 2021, there was one as recent as 2024 where they practiced disconnecting themselves from the internet. Can you give us an idea of how this actually played out? What are the lessons that the Russians would have learned from this? Because the reports obviously would not be released, but what does an exercise like this, really tell you? Why do we need to do something similar, you think?
Okay, so details of these exercises are limited, but what has happened is Russia viewed the internet like India did as a normal domain. But once the color revolution started, President Putin understood that this is a domain which needs to be controlled. And he then immediately gave those orders, and to say that we need to prepare for a day when, if the internet is interrupted. And the Russians seem to have created certain appliances which they have embedded into their net, where they say can resolve all their, websites, even if it is cut off. It can, ensure that the Russian internet stays up. So when I had a chance to interact with ICANN, I had asked them, so supposing Indian internet access to the ICANN root servers, because we have also got thousands of instances of these root zone servers in India, but supposing this particular access is cut off, how long will the Indian internet, stay up? So they have told me that it is expected that it should stay up for around 7 days, after which it will start dissipating if you don't get the control back up.
Right.
Okay. So there are two aspects to this. One is, we see as a military man, we always have to anticipate everything. Supposing the root zone server, whoever controls the root zone server, decides to itself kick us out, then we have to, that is one which Putin is always, that's why he is doing the exercises which he is doing.
Right.
The others, if it gets, cut off in the undersea cable. So both as a nation, it's who will plan for our defense. We have to plan for it. And this is scenarios which we need to war game, and we need to come up with solutions.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, why are we transiting into a 100% digital economy where, the whole nation will come to a standstill because
where
of other people?
you've handed over your vulnerability to another nation or a group of other nations. But thank you very much, Colonel Pavitran, Commander Arnab Das, for highlighting these vulnerabilities in the light of this new report on the fact that several countries of the world are worried about undersea cable disruption. Thank you very much for joining us.